Hello, everyone. I'm Andy, and welcome to Stackin It Up, a series of tech transformation talks on the people, technology, and stories behind real-world digital transformation. Today, I'm joined by Jimmy Tran. Hey, Jimmy.
Hey, what's up, Andy?
Hey, thanks for joining us.
Sure, no problem.
Awesome. Hey, Jimmy, would you mind telling the audience a little bit about what you do here at Mark III?
Sure, of course. So just a little bit about my history first. So before Mark III, I've worked in a number of different corporate IT roles in a variety of different software and SaaS companies and technology companies, primarily in Austin, Texas. Um, as far as what I've done, I've worked a lot in a variety of different corporate IT roles to help design, implement, and manage their IT systems and data centers. As far as kind of my skills and kind of expertise and kind of what I've done in the past is pretty much I've had the I guess I don't know if I would say luxury, but I've had the opportunity to wear multiple hats. So I have a pretty diverse background and a range of experience on a couple of different areas, but the main areas being systems, networking and security. But as far as what I do here at Mark III, so I'm a senior system architect. I've been here for over 5 years now. And I also kind of focus on some of the same areas of what I've done in the past. So data center design, virtualization, storage and SAN networking, IP networking, x86, HPC, as well as private and public hybrid cloud deployments. So yeah.
Awesome. And today's topic of our talk is all around Azure Stack and Azure Stack Hub. Jimmy, can you tell the audience what Azure Stack and Azure Stack Hub is?
Sure. So Azure Stack is it's a portfolio of technologies from Microsoft, and there's three different products in that solution. So the first one is Azure Stack Edge, and that is a kind of a appliance that's actually deployed at the edge of your infrastructure, and that's actually fully managed from Azure, and that is a hardware appliance that's optimized for machine learning type of applications, and then kind of once it does on the edge analytics, it can upload and stream those data and information to the Azure Public Cloud. Now, as far as what Azure Stack HCI is, so what that is that is a you can kind of think of it as a reference architecture, Microsoft validated HCI hyper-converged infrastructure. So you can purchase it through a variety of different partners, and what that is it's kind of a pre-integrated solution that includes Hyper-V as its hypervisor, as well as Microsoft validated hardware to run everything. So that's Azure Stack HCI. And then last and probably most important, and what we'll be talking about the most, is Azure Stack Hub. And what Azure Stack Hub is, just I guess to kind of sum it up, is it's a hybrid cloud platform that lets you use Azure services from it allows you to use Azure Stack services or Azure services either in your company or a service provider's data center. As a developer with Azure Stack Hub, it allows you to build apps locally at your data center and then deploy those apps either to public Azure, to your in-house Azure Stack Hub, or it allows you to create hybrid apps between the two, link the two, and then allows you to create applications that really span across data centers. As a IT professional, though, I think of it as kind of like a data center in a box. So what that is pretty much it gives you all of the same services, APIs, and management interface as Azure Public. And it brings all of those Azure services and capabilities directly to your data center. And it gives you all of Azure's IaaS services, so infrastructure as a service, as well as platform as a service capabilities. But it's a fully integrated turnkey solution delivered at rack scale into your data center. And really, you just kind of purchase that skill, you roll it into your data center, you plug it in, you just configure it. But then after that, it's for the most part fully managed and supported from Microsoft and the OEM that you purchase it from.
When does using Azure Stack Hub make sense over just using Azure Public?
So there's definitely a variety of use cases for using Azure Stack Hub, but some of the most popular ones that I found include, this is probably the most important one, or one of the most important ones, is data sovereignty, security, and compliance. So using the cloud, I guess using the public cloud, you really don't have full control of where your data lives, and it's dedicated. Well, it's shared, not dedicated infrastructure. But with Azure Stack, since it lives in the premise of your own data center, it lives kind of behind your firewall, and you have full control of the data, and you're not using shared infrastructure. So, from a security perspective and from a compliance perspective, it's extremely popular. On top of that, some other applications include edge and disconnected applications in Azure Stack. So think about remote sites or sites that require Azure services or just general IT services, but they don't have a consistent connection to the public internet to use public Azure services. So think about cruise ships, oil rigs, or refineries that don't have really a constant internet connection. That's another great use case for Azure Stack Hub. On top of that, performance is another key use case. So high performance analytics, big data, low latency applications. They work very well with Azure Stack Hub. If you think about public cloud is normally extremely slow, or I don't want to say extremely slow, but it's typically slower than your on-premise infrastructure. Since this is running as on-premise infrastructure, either in a hybrid or all SSD configuration, all your workloads that you run in Azure Stack Hub run super fast. And lastly, kind of the last use case that I find for Azure Stack Hub is just as a platform for modern application development. So this gives you the infrastructure, gives you the platform to build modern applications. So once you build it once, you can really deploy it anywhere. It allows you to do things such as functions, serverless compute, and it just allows you to have a platform and framework to do modern application development, microservices, and so forth.
Tell us about a recent use case here at Mark III. Why did they go Azure Stack Hub?
So we recently worked with a large health institute who was already working with Azure Public for building some of their more modern applications. Now, as they were already using Azure Public Cloud, Azure Stack, we found actually made perfect sense for them. So some of their use cases or some of the things that they decided to do on Azure Stack Hub was bring it in as a platform for testing and development. On top of that, data sovereignty and control of patient data or other sensitive data was also key. Um, they had a mandate where, of course, any type of patient or sensitive data could not go on the public cloud. But with Azure Stack Hub, since it is behind their firewall, then that allows them to kind of overcome some of those limitations. On top of that, it also gives them a on-premise IaaS and PaaS services that's managed hand in hand with the IT group and the business owners. So it allows them to deploy or have a framework to deploy services or infrastructure within their data center from a automated set of APIs. On top of that, it also gives them a platform, it gave them a platform to migrate some of their VMware VMs actually to Azure Stack Hub. And eventually, once it's on Azure Stack Hub, they are continuously evaluating what makes sense to migrate to Azure Public, what makes sense to leave in Azure Stack Hub, and then what makes sense to leave in in VMware. So it gives them kind of a test bed to kind of a test bed to move VMs from VMware to Azure Stack Hub, and then eventually to Azure Public. And then lastly is probably just the on-premise performance of Azure Stack Hub comparatively to Azure Public. They get significantly more performance from using on-premise hardware than what they would get using Azure Public.
So it sounds like truly the best of all worlds. But as we know in this industry, nothing's ever perfect. What are some of the gotchas to look out for, especially during the rollout of Azure Stack Hub, since you were very, very closely involved with that example you just described?
Sure, yeah, it's definitely a very flexible solution, and for the most part, it is relatively, I don't want to say easy to deploy, but it is for the most part easy since it is a fully integrated, fully managed solution. That being said, there definitely are some gotchas that you kind of need to look out for. Some of the kind of the key ones that I found in some of the deployments that I've done is that really one of the first and one of the main ones is that as far as the services and functionality of Azure Stack Hub compared to Azure Public, there are some differences between the two. Everything that's in Azure Public isn't necessarily in Azure Stack Hub yet. There's typically a delay. And then as new features and new services are released on Azure Public, that's evaluated, and then if they deem that it is um, a good service to bring to Azure Stack Hub, then it is then migrated and converted and then added to Azure Stack Hub. On top of that, API versions between Azure Public and Azure Stack Hub are different. Or they could be different. So if you're doing a lot of API automation with Azure Public and you're using some of the newer versions of the Azure API, you might need to limit the API versions that you're using in Azure Public so that it's 100% compatible with the version that you're also using for Azure Stack Hub on premise. Some other things that you need to definitely consider is your network integration. With all things, it can be a little complex, but definitely if you kind of look through everything that's required, it's definitely, if you kind of do your homework, it's actually not too bad. But from kind of just sum it up real quick, you just need a BGP parrot to your top of racks switches. Also supports static routes if you want to go that route. You really need to carefully look at the bandwidth between all the components. If you have a Azure Express route today and you want to utilize that within Azure Stack as well, there are some kind of caveats there that you need to consider and look at. And then kind of the last thing with networking is that you kind of need to consider about how all of your guest workloads talk to your on-premise workloads or your outside of Azure Stack, just your standard VMs. So typically that's either done with VPNs. And that can either be the Microsoft software VPN, which does have some limitations, or you can look at maybe virtual routers and firewalls, such as like a virtual F5 or something like that. Some other caveats that gotchas that you might want to consider is your Microsoft licensing. If you currently have a EA enterprise agreement volume licensing with Microsoft, then you could utilize that existing licensing versus just using the pay-as-you-go license with Azure Stack Hub. And the main thing, and kind of the biggest gotcha that I see a lot of customers maybe aren't fully aware of is that once you purchase Azure Stack isn't free. So there's typically two ways you can buy Azure Stack. One is the CapEx model where you buy everything up front, then you never need to pay anything again. That's typically though one of the more expensive models to do it. Typically what most customers do is more the OpEx model where it's more of a pay-as-you-go, similar to Azure Public. But the key difference between Azure Stack Hub and Azure Public is that it's significantly cheaper to run your workloads in Azure Stack Hub since you own the hardware fee, and then all the ingress charges and so forth are removed. So it's significantly cheaper to run your workloads in Azure Stack Hub. That being said, there is still kind of that recurring cost if you go with the OpEx model with Azure Stack Hub.
Awesome. How does an organization start learning about Azure Stack Hub if they're in Azure Public today and they want to understand Hub, or they want to come up with a cloud strategy? What are some ways to start exploring that?
For sure. So Microsoft actually has a plethora of information available at the Azure Stack page directly. So they have very well written guides and wikis that will actually explain everything as far as how to use Azure Stack Hub, Azure Stack, what all the different components are, and kind of how they're configured, and pretty much almost everything that you'd want to know. If you kind of read through the Microsoft documentation, it's definitely there and available. On top of that, Mark III can also come on site or remote because of the situation, of course, and introduce you to Azure Stack, Azure Stack Hub, and kind of help you build some use cases in your environment. On top of that, Mark III also hosts regular workshops where you can learn more and get hands-on experience uh, with a real Azure Stack. On top of that, throughout the world and throughout the country, there's actually Azure Stack Innovation Centers where we can actually, where you can actually go get hands-on experience with real Azure Stack environments, and then have a tailored learning session on Azure Stack and how it could make sense in your environment. And then last, if you actually really want to kind of get some hands-on experience with Azure Stack, Azure Stack Hub, then you can deploy what's called a Azure Stack Development Kit, which is free, provided you have a server that meets kind of the minimum specs in your environment. But if you have a server, or if you don't have a server, you can always purchase a server. But with that, you can deploy the Azure Stack Development Kit on that server, and it gives you a full Azure Stack Hub environment on a single node. It allows you to test it, and it's fully free. So yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for your time today, Jimmy. This was incredibly informative. Before we sign off, can you tell the audience how they can reach you directly?
Sure, of course. So if you have any questions at all about Azure Stack or anything else, then you can email me directly at jimmy.tran@mark3sys.com. So that's jimmy.tran@mark3sys.com. Or you can just reach out to your local Mark III sales rep, and they can definitely reach out to me as well.
All
Thanks
right.
a lot.
Well, thank you. To see more videos in the Stackin It Up series, please subscribe to the Mark III channel on YouTube. Thanks, everyone, and see you next time.